Hello, my name is Derek Long. I'm an assistant professor of media and cinema studies at the College of Media at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Today, I'll be talking a little bit about the film industry and COVID's impact on it. My research focuses on the origins and the history of film distribution. I'm currently completing a book on the subject for University of Texas Press. In the Media and Cinema Studies department, I teach courses on cinema history, graduate historiography, animation, and digital media production. I think the most profound effect that COVID has had on the film industry is its acceleration of trends in movie exhibition. So theaters were already in a tough spot even before the pandemic. And small independent theaters in particular were really struggling to stay afloat. Movie and television producers and distributors will be fine, I think, since the demand for media content remains. Audiences will get that content through whatever means they can. But theaters, really, their only real source of income is in-person attendance. And with that attendance severely restricted, theaters that were breaking even are now struggling. And those that were struggling are now closing. The response to the pandemic has been really not very well handled in the United States. The result is that the current business model of the big theater chains, as an example, is really under a lot of strain. Right now, it's less about adapting to COVID and more about simply staying solvent until a vaccine hopefully brings audiences back sometime in 2021, which is by no means guaranteed. This year, 80 to 90% of movie theaters' revenue has been wiped out. While you did see various mitigation strategies, particularly over the summer and early fall, things like installing social distancing rules, renting out whole theaters to private parties, installing new ventilation systems, selling tickets for lower prices, and so forth. The fact is that the pandemic is now worse than ever, and things are looking pretty grim, even for the big chains. So the distributors and the production studios, they certainly aren't thriving, to be clear. This has been a difficult time for the industry writ large, but the difference is that they have the luxury of options. The basic strategy at this point for the big studios releasing those films is simply to delay that release until next year. And the reason they're doing that is that those big movies can still make much more in a theatrical release than they could if they were released to streaming services. It's also important to keep in mind that they're selling to a global market. So even if theatrical releasing is, frankly, in a kind of shambles in the United States, they can still make money in exhibition in the other countries that have done a bit of a better job in managing the pandemic. I think there is a definite shift towards streaming media. The question is really how far that shift goes. If streaming were a cure-all for COVID, we would have seen a more drastic move toward it already, I think. And to be sure, distributors like streaming in part because it's pure profit for them. So if Disney releases a film on Disney Plus, it doesn't have to share any of that income with theaters. What's complicating things, though, is that streaming isn't quite lucrative enough yet to make it an obvious replacement for traditional theatrical releases. But assuming that streaming does dominate the future, just for a second, we may actually see more small productions, simply because smaller productions can more easily profit under streaming, at least as far as the current model works. And I think it's also important to emphasize that this is a pattern that was starting even before the pandemic. Those kind of smaller mid-budget films were already moving out of theaters and kind of towards streaming even before the pandemic, particularly art house and independent productions. I do think, as dark as things seem right now for theatrical exhibition, I do think it will survive. It's just less likely that you're going to see interesting films in a theater as opposed to on a streaming platform.